are live this time. Hello, welcome back to Red Devils Talk. I just did the whole intro. If you're listening to this on Spotify, obviously you're doing it on playback. I just did the whole intro, but it didn't go live. Ciaran had the same problem with his podcast. Periscope are shutting down. So, yeah. Jamie's here in the comments. So, yes, we are actually live right now. Welcome back. I'm Haider Rabani. Nice to see you all. It's been a long week. Manchester United have played quite a few times, haven't they, since we last spoke? Oh, mate, Saturday was gutting. But yesterday we won, Joe. And look, it's good to be back. What are your thoughts generally on United at the moment? Are you feeling as high as we were after the Southampton game? Are you feeling like we've plateaued a little bit and we're kind of back where expectations should be?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's hard to follow up a 9-0, really, when you think about it, isn't it? I mean, how do you follow that? You know what I mean? It is difficult. And at one stage, it did look like it was going quite well. I mean, we were sort of 2-0 up and looking quite comfortable at half-time against Everton. And I was thinking back to the question you asked me on Red Devils Talk last week about, after the 9-0, does it mean that United have turned a corner now and have they found that ruthless streak? Well, I suppose if they had, Haider, then I suppose on Saturday night against Everton, when they were 2-0 up at half-time, they would have gone on and tried to get 3 and 4 quite quickly, and then that game would have been a lot easier to close out. But obviously, to be fair to Everton, they responded at half-time, which they had to, because I thought they were really poor in the first half by their standards, to be fair. Their tactics didn't seem to be working at all. But obviously, they got the first goal, and it was just the worry for me, and it's sort of this whole thing seems to have carried over since Everton's first goal last Saturday. The mistake, if you want to call it a mistake from De Gea, I think he should be doing better with that. If he's not catching it, he should be pushing it much further out or even using his feet like he normally does. From that mistake onwards, there's a real fragility about the back line, the team in general. They just look nervous, as if it was almost as if they hadn't really made a mistake for a while and they thought they'd eradicated it from the game. But actually, that mistake reminded them that actually they haven't come as far as they probably think they have at the back. And here we go again. And then I think the whole sort of game mirrored that. And obviously the way it ended was just, heartbreaking, really. You never want to end a game like that. It was just felt like a defeat. And then I think the hangover from that, even though the team was quite different last night, we did make some changes. I still think there was a hangover from that. And it was a classic United performance when the team comes and puts everybody behind the ball. I mean, there was a lot of times last night, that first half, where you could have freeze the screen. And West Ham had like a back eight, Haider, you know what I mean? And it was like classic. United are never breaking that down. And it's just, they're just not going to, not when they haven't got Bruno in the team anyway. And then obviously the second half, West Ham come at us a bit more. And even when they did sort of left a bit more space, United still didn't look like they were ready to capitalise. So it was a bit of a hangover from Saturday. But I think the main thing, obviously, last night is we did get through. It's just a shame it took 120 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's a very, very fair reflection of the game. Look, for me, the victory is the most important thing, but it was a bit flat. Quite a few changes. If you're trying to listen to this on Periscope, for some reason it's deleted. So we've only got a few in here on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. Ciaran, I want to talk about one man in particular, in Scott McTominay. The question I've got across the bottom is he in the form of his life? Look, when I looked at the statistics today, there really wasn't much difference between his passing percentage last season to this season. His expected goals is very similar. He's actually matched his goal tally and assist tally from last season. I mean, looking at all those things, it does kind of show you, doesn't it, that you actually got to use this source and this source more. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, I'm pointing at my eyes because you can pluck every single stat under the sun. But at the end of the day, sometimes they actually show what's going on is very, very similar. But Scott McTominay has definitely gone up a level for me. What we've seen a bit more in the last few weeks is we've seen him. He's not sitting anymore, right? He's getting forward. I think that's really, really key because being an ex-striker as well, you can actually see the way he strikes the ball is absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful, actually. He's got very good technique. He keeps it low. He's got good power. I mean, he seems to be scoring worldies pretty much all the time. But when you look at all these things, United are starting to rely on him, aren't they? He's now almost a shoo-in. And I think elements of that is to do with the fact that Matic isn't playing as well to the level that he was at last season. Obviously, Matic was Ollie's go-to man at the heart of midfield in terms of screening and defense. But I think now, if you're looking at it, Bruno's first name on the team sheet in terms of the midfielders, with Pogba out injured now, it's probably McTominay, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is McTominay. And when we talk about this whole in the form of his life, I've always said that when it comes to any kind of player, look, stats are great. You can, but the thing that people need to remember is you can incorporate a stat to shape whatever opinion you have. You can have a statistic to show that McTominay has not been great this season. You can get another statistic to say he's been one of United's most important midfielders. But again, it always comes to the eye test. You should always have the two sources of when you're actually analysing anyone should be your, as we mentioned, your left eye and your right eye. It's always the most important. Yes, stats can help you back up an argument, but I think what we're seeing from McTominay is that I don't think he's afraid to get forward anymore. And that's the difference. I think before, I don't think he was as comfortable in the United team because you looked at the end of last season and what was it? Matic played maybe the last 10 or so games. And when Matic didn't play, Fred played. That does a lot to a player's confidence. And when he's playing as a defender for Scotland, and it's difficult. But now I think he knows his role in the team. He knows that he's an important player. He may not start every single game, but it's important that he knows that when he is to get forward, that he does try and create things and make things happen. Look, he's never going to be a Bruno type player that's going to be the player that gets those assists, but he gets in the right positions to have chances. And look, at the end of the day, I'd rather have him taking shots than I would prefer seeing Fred and the likes take shots, because I don't know, Fred is the most un-Brazilian midfielder I think I've ever seen. But you look at McTominay and I think he's very assured of what he's doing. He knows what his job is and he does it to the best of his ability. It just means he's not going to have a 10 out of 10 performance every single day, every single game, but he actually is having a really big influence on United winning some of these scrappy games. We complained for the last 12 months that Maguire is not scoring enough from corners. You actually look at McTominay, and I think he's been more dangerous than Maguire has. And all the attention goes to Maguire when we take corners. And you look at McTominay, there was games, I think, against PSG that he had maybe 2 or 3 opportunities to score. You see him against Newcastle. We've seen him a couple of times now, and I think he's gotten his highest goal tally for United already this season, and there's still plenty of games for him to play in. I think I mention it all the time. You can have those superstars, but you need glue players as well, and I think he's one of those glue players that Ferguson always had. I think we mentioned it before, the idea of Darren Fletcher, and I don't think he's going to be that far off where we saw Darren Fletcher in terms of how important he may be for the overall setup. And look, I guess having Carrick and Fletcher and the coaching staff only helps him.
Yeah, some excellent points there. I'm going to read out a few of the comments. Haider here saying, I wouldn't play Scott as a DM. He's a box-to-box player.
I agree.
Aaron as well. He can put himself about. He has high energy, but he's using that energy to make driving runs and breaking into box rather than sitting, which isn't his natural game. Yeah, absolutely. I want to come to you, Joe, because Ciaran brings up that point about the being like Darren Fletcher. And actually, when people were saying this early on in the season, I was thinking, no, not at all. Darren Fletcher's he was a technically actually underrated player, I would say. He was a player who wasn't just there to sort of make up the numbers. I used to feel like that a little bit with McTominay. But I actually agree with that. And the reason why I say he's a Darren Fletcher figure is because you need players like McTominay in the squad who are going to be hardworking, local lad. I know Darren Fletcher wasn't essentially a local lad, but he came to the academy, who will put their body about, who's got great energy, as Aaron said, who's going to give absolute 110% every time he plays. But my point when I was saying he wasn't like Darren Fletcher is because when you looked around at the general squad that Sir Alex had, it was packed full of Ronaldos, Rooney's, Berbatovs, Vidic, world-class players. Now, but actually, when you look at it, if you get these supposed world-class players around McTominay, you can't win a league title without the McTominays in the squad, if that makes sense.
No.
So, how do you see it? Because I think we've also got to temper expectations. Paul Pogba's probably going to go. We saw last night many times when Paul Pogba doesn't play, there's no one to progress the ball in midfield. We had Fred and Matic, and we will talk about we will talk about Van der Beek, and I do think some of Van der Beek's problems yesterday, you can relate them to what was behind him. You can, not all of them, but you can. You have to acknowledge that. Can Scott replace Pogba? I'm laughing because I don't think he can, but that doesn't mean that Scott is an integral part to the squad. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think this is the thing for United, Haider. They need, as good as Scott's been, and I hope he continues to develop. And you're absolutely right; he's crucial in order to build in a squad. People like him, like Ciaran said, the glue. I think that's a really good word. But for United, Haider, you don't win titles by having Scott McTominay's playing week in, week out. Unfortunately, as good as Darren Fletcher was, and I love Darren Fletcher. John O'Shea was another versatile squad player that we had. Loved those players. But if they had to play week in, week out, Haider, you weren't winning league titles. So, no, I don't think he can sort of hit the level. Interestingly, though, I heard a stat earlier, which I'm surprised about. He scored 7 goals this season now, McTominay. That's more than all our midfielders combined, which is a great effort. And I think what it is, to be honest, Haider, I think it's an evolution of this McFred pivot. And I've noticed it over the last couple of weeks. I think what Ollie's realised he's got to do if McFred are going to play together. We know he likes playing that combination. But especially at home, he's had to find a way of making it more aggressive. And I think it started against Southampton when we went down to 10 men the other week, where he just pushed McTominay on a little bit. And I've noticed it again when he came on in the game yesterday. I feel like they are still the double pivot, but I feel like McTominay is getting slightly more advanced now and a bit further forward. And I think it's just an evolution of the system, because I think we've all said our criticism of that partnership is that it's probably a bit too defensive, isn't it? Especially when you're playing at home against lesser sides. But if McTominay can continue to sort of break forward the way he is and get on the edge of the box, like you said, he does strike the ball really well. I think it was quite telling in Ollie in his interview after the game yesterday said something about he's a really good finisher, and that is a compliment coming from Ollie. And he even went as far as to say some of the other lads could learn from the way he strikes the ball, because if you notice when a chance drops to McTominay, he doesn't think about it, Haider. He just hits it. He hits it, and I think that's what Ollie would like.
Marcus could learn that.
From the likes of, we've criticised Rashford on this show for taking too many touches before shooting. It seems to take an eternity to get the ball out of his feet. Same with Martial. It's almost, especially at the moment, Martial looks like he has to get really close before he fancies himself to score. You know what I mean? He's got to get really close in. So I think what he wants his strikers to look at McTominay and just be a little bit more carefree when you hit the ball. Just don't worry about it. Strike it. Believe in your ability and believe in your execution. And I think, like I said, coming from Ollie, that's quite a big compliment.
Yeah, well said. A lot of love from McTominay in the comments. Ciaran, I'm going to come to you really, really quickly. Just answer this in, just short, because we've got quite a lot to get through today. Jamie, is it Jamie asking it? Yeah, Jamie's asking, if Fergie was here, McTominay would get in the side under him? I think he would. What's your view on that quickly? I think he would. But I think, as Joe said, it wouldn't be week in, week out, would it?
Yeah, he would. It would be in the same way as the likes of, I know I mentioned Fletcher earlier. Now, Fletcher later on in his career was a very important member. I don't think it would be in that kind of context. But you look at the way he used John O'Shea, and John O'Shea didn't play every game, but he was really important. Park Ji-sung didn't play every single game, but he was an important member of the squad. I think McTominay would be the same. I think he would be one of those squad players that Ferguson would use in particular games that he knew could do the job that would elevate the team's performance. And I think that's where he's at, and that's what he does now. He doesn't need to play every game, but in particular games, he can be one of the reasons that United can go on and win. And I think he showed that yesterday when he came on. I think he was very impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I think, look, McTominay deserves a lot of plaudits, but I think also we got to temper our plaudits. That makes sense, because as Rob would say, don't get high, don't get too low. I think McTominay's been fantastic this season, but if you want to, I think one of the comments earlier, Kerwin said actually that his passing does need to improve, and then we're talking about his passing, his ability probably when he's got a lot of pressure on him or in tight spaces, that needs to improve. But if you're going to improve that, I mean, he's got the, like I said, the attitude, he's got the physique, he's got the energy. He's covers every blade of grass. He's a good player. I mean, look, Alan's coming in here saying, for me, United have too many players who don't truly fit how Solskjaer wants to play. Van der Beek's an obvious example, but I also question Fred, not a number 6, not really an 8 either. Will the director of football fix this issue? We're actually going to answer this because we're going to talk about Van der Beek now. The conundrum that is Donny Van der Beek. Look, I've actually said this quite a few times this season that although a lot of fans were getting very high on Fred, I'm saying very, very high. Oh, he's a world-class midfielder. Fred is very, very limited. Like, I'm telling you, he's good at 3 things: pressing and his energy, his tenacity, and I would say his ability to do a job that the manager says, right, this is what you're going to do all game, and this is what you got to do. He's not a good passer of the ball. His touch isn't particularly brilliant. He's an awful shooter. I'm just being completely honest with you. I think there's another player that we overrated. I'm actually quite shocked that Pep Guardiola was looking at someone like Fred to come into his midfield, because I just don't see how he fits into that. He's not comfortable in possession. Does that mean that he doesn't have a role in the squad? Not at all. You need players like Fred. Fred, for me, falls in the same category as McTominay, except I think McTominay's probably got a little bit better than him. Paulie is going to be absolutely stewing, listen to this. But Alan says, will the director of football fix this issue? Possibly, but I also think that it depends who the managers are, right? So you've had Jose Mourinho as one manager, you've had Louis van Gaal. There's been no continuity, as we've spoken many times before. So you could have a director of football in there. But if the director of football is just going to buy whichever managers that are going to come in, then it doesn't fix the problem. Donny van der Beek, we're going to talk about him, Joe. I seem to have struck a nerve about Donny van der Beek, where I said, and I'll say it with my chest out, that his long-term future is not at Manchester United. That doesn't mean he's a terrible player. He just doesn't fit the system. And there's a fantastic thread by United Arena today, absolutely fantastic on him. And he compared Van der Beek actually to Shinji Kagawa. Similar situations. When Shinji Kagawa came to squad, he was probably one of the most highly rated attacking midfielders in the league, in Bundesliga. He really, really, I mean, that was one of those that I was really gutted it didn't work out.
Mkhitaryan, another one. Yeah,
he played 4-2-3-1 at Dortmund. He was the attacking fulcrum there. He was everything good went through Kagawa for Klopp. Came to Manchester United with really high expectations. United played 4-4-2 almost under Sir Alex, and he was shifted out onto left. I mean, he had a few good performances. Norwich was one of them. But he doesn't mean he was a bad player. He just did not fit the system. And this is what I think with Donny van der Beek. He's not a bad player at all. I've praised him in this thread. I've said, he's got great spatial awareness. He's one-touch football. He's a clever player. He makes clever runs. But his runs he's looking to make. I spoke to someone at work about it today. He was spot on. He said he likes to drift out into the wide areas. He's not staying central enough. We'll play 4-2-3-1. The number 10 in Ollie's system has to be created, has to be able to take the ball and carry it and then create. Donny van der Beek is not a passer of the ball. He's not a progressive passer. Donny van der Beek is not a progressive ball carrier. What Donny van der Beek is he needs 10 players around him who are going to play one-touch football, who are going to see his run and make those late runs into the box. That's what Donny van der Beek does. Donny van der Beek cannot play number 8. Anyone that's saying he's playing number 8, he cannot play number 8. Why? Because he's not a progressive passer. You're going to have the same issues that you have when Fred and McTominay played together.
Yeah.
Now, can he develop that? Perhaps, but he's never done that. I mean, Rob always says he's like Frank Lampard, making those runs late into the box. But, Joe, what is this obsession with Donny van der Beek that the pressure's so high on him now that when he plays like he did yesterday, it wasn't terrible, but when he puts in performance like that, the fans are upset. But why can't certain fans actually see that the issue why Ollie's not picking him is because he does not fit the way Manchester United are playing?
Well, first of all, Haider, they're angry because it's a shiny new toy thing, aren't they? We all want, when we, and let's be honest with you, Haider, I remember doing a transfer show with you in the summer, welcoming Van der Beek with 2 Dutch football journalist experts, and we were high on the signing. I remember us both saying at the time what a great signing this was. I suppose you could probably go back through our tweets and see tweets where we were so high on Van der Beek and saying it was an absolute brilliant piece of business. But, obviously, what you then have to be able to do is you need to be able to analyse and watch over time and observe with your 2 sources, like you say, and you see obvious issues. And then, you have to have the humility to say, well, maybe I got it wrong. You know what I mean? Maybe, it isn't just because he's a new player and he hasn't played much doesn't mean to say that you have to have the same thoughts now that you had in the summer. We've seen enough of Donny in this system to suggest that it probably doesn't work. And I mean, people that saying he's a number 8 in Ollie's system, he has got nothing at all in his game that can make him a number 8 in Ollie's system. The reasons that you mentioned above, you get exactly the same as McTominay and Fred. I would argue you get even less, Haider, because you don't get that energy and intensity and physicality that you get. At least you get that from McFred. You know what I mean? At least you get that ability to press, to challenge, to get stuck in. He doesn't even give you that yet, whether that's because his confidence is low or whether he just hasn't got that in him or whether he can adapt it. We're not sure. Obviously, time will tell. But, yeah, and again, as a number 10, what have we said? We've said before on this show, Hayden, when Bruno struggles as a 10 for United is when teams have forced him to go out wide to pick up the ball. Because, like you said, in Ollie's system, the 10 has to stay central. So Bruno, when he's at least effective for United, is when he's being pushed wide, and I think there's 2 teams that have done that really well against us. One of those is Wolves, and the other one's Manchester City. They've done a really good job at ensuring that the only place Bruno can pick up the ball for large portions of the game is in wide areas. And then for whatever reason, Bruno's just not as effective there, whether it's the system, whether it's Bruno's skill set, I'm not sure. But what was most worrying for me about Donny last night in his performance was I actually saw him making quite a lot of good runs, quite a good movement. But it was almost as if the players, they saw him. I know they saw him because I could see them looking in the direction, but they wasn't looking for that pass. Now, I'm not saying that this is Vinicius, Benzema, don't pass to him sort of situation. But what I am suggesting is maybe the players around him don't. They can see he's made that clever move, but they know if they pass it to him, Haider, it's just going to break down because he's either going to play it safe backwards where it came from, or he's going to play it square, or he's going to try and move it too quickly and the move will just break down. So I just think what worried me last night I think his performance and his movement off the ball wasn't too bad, but the worry for me would be the players around him just don't look like they have the confidence in him, and I think that is a real big concern because let's not forget, we just see Donny when we see him on the telly every weekend. These players work with him every week, every day in training, Haider, and if they are not feeling it with him, I think that's a big concern.
Yeah, it's actually Andrew. He's in the comments. Hello, Andrew, mate. Me and Andrew were the ones having the debate. And look, I do see some points. I mean, Andrew said here, to be fair, I agree with your assessment on Donny van der Beek. Just think the long term, we should be building towards having players like him rather than players that can't play with him. I completely agree. Look, you guys know this. In October, I turned around, and again, I got pelters this, but I said I don't think he's an Ollie signing. That doesn't mean that Ollie didn't okay it, but he was not first choice, Ciaran. We've had this discussion many a time. We all know it's Jack Grealish. If they got relegated, Villa got relegated, Jack Grealish would be a Manchester United player right now. Again, Donny and Jack Grealish are completely different players. Jack Grealish is a fantastic ball carrier. Actually, what Manchester United need, Donny van der Beek, he's got excellent movement off the ball, excellent spatial awareness. So for me, that the move was always very strange because when I did watch Donny a little bit more, and I'm not going to confess I watched a lot of him in Ajax. I watched what the regular person watched, but obviously, Joe, we've had James Rowe on the podcast, who's very, very knowledgeable of Dutch football, extremely knowledgeable. Watch a bit more of him, and James said at the time, like, he's not a number 6. He's played number 6 at Ajax. He's actually started as a 6 when he was in the youth team and went further forward. So I think one of the biggest problems is that, Ciaran, I'm going to come to you on this, is that it's been fed to fans that he can play number 6 or he can play deep. This is the problem. And we know we know that this has been fed. I think also, if you listen to commentary, I don't know who you had in Ireland, but we had Genus. He's a terrible. But seriously, Joe, some of the stuff he was saying, you actually think, have you watched Donny play? He was comparing him to Mark Noble, and I'm thinking, what are you talking about? But, when you look at Donny van der Beek, he doesn't have the attributes to play number 8 in the Premier League. Can he develop that? Of course he can. Fred developed it. Other players have developed it. He's definitely got it up there to develop it. But number 6 or number 8 at Ajax, I've been saying this all day today. Number 6 at Ajax, number 8 Ajax is completely different. The pace of the Premier League is completely different. The territory and possession that Ajax have. Playing number 6 at Ajax, you're almost playing deep into the opposition half, aren't you? You're nearer to their goal than your own goal, And when you consider all these sort of things, the territory is a big one. Also, playing with players that you've grown up, there's a certain style of player that Ajax play, which Manchester United just don't play. We'd love United to play Ajax football, wouldn't we? The total football, but we don't. Joe, you're on mute.
We'd love everyone to play that way, Ada, wouldn't we?
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So my point is, perhaps maybe I'm writing Donny off. It's not so much I'm writing off because he's not a good enough player, Ciaran. I'm writing him off because I don't see Ole Gunnar Solskjaer changing the system. And if Manchester United go and get Declan Rice and they go to play a 4-3-3, I still don't think Donny is the right player to play as 2-8s because, and I said this the other day as well, Bruno Fernandes is a number 10. And United shouldn't fix something that isn't broken. I said to someone, don't drop him further back just so that you can fit Donny in the side. Why do that? He's doing fantastically at number 10. As soon as you drop him deeper, you lose, over 50% of your goals? Because that's what Bruno's contributing at the moment. We got to look at this logically. United, if they're going to have to fix this problem, Paul Pogba goes. I've said this already. You go and get Rice, you go and get Neves. And then with Donny van der Beek, you say to him, right, you need to perform or you're out. That's my point. I would love Donny van der Beek to be brilliant. I mean, another fantastic thing that United Arena says, I do want to credit him because, I don't think it's right when people take other people's content and things like that. You've got to give credit. He said a fantastic thing yesterday. I'm in a group chat with him and he said that he's an upgrade on Lingard. He said this at the beginning of the season. I remember him saying this. He's an upgrade on Lingard and I never expected him to start. But he isn't the typical number 10. You have different types of number 10s, right? You have number 10s that can carry the ball like Bruno Fernandes. They can create. But you have other number 10s that don't do that. Lingard, you wouldn't say is a creator. He's fantastic off the ball. So that doesn't mean that Van der Beek is a bad player. He's just a different type of 10. And Ciaran, I'm going to let you answer this. I know you've got a lot to say about this. Andrew's saying here, City managed to play with 2 attacking 8s, 10s. We should be building towards being a great side. I do think Van der Beek could play like Gundogan. I think they're completely different players. Gundogan has so much quality on the ball. And this is what I'm trying to say. Gundogan's passing range is phenomenal. Donny van der Beek is not a progressive passer. And that's why you can't compare him to a Gundogan. As Rob says on the masterclass, he always compares him to Frank Lampard. That's actually a fair comparison. The way he gets into the box, I would say, if you're going to compare him to anyone. But Donny is a bit of an anomaly for me because he's a number 10. I know I've spoken for about 10 minutes, Ciaran, but I'm going to allow you to have 10 minutes to break this down because I know you feel very strongly about this. And guys, get your questions in. We'll answer this. This is, I understand why people think he could play as an 8, but his passing is just not there for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's not a number 10. He's not a number 6. What you said about Ajax is their number 6 and their number 8 pretty much playing the same area of the pitch that their number 10 does. They're very, especially when they're playing in the league. I can hear myself.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo for some reason. Joe, just go on mute.
Yeah. So basically, they're able to play very advanced, and that's why you saw a lot of when Ajax were playing in the Champions League, even that you saw Donny get into the box quite a lot. The problem is, and I mentioned this probably about 2 or 3 months ago, I think stylistically it doesn't work. I think you're not going to try and force Donny in to accommodate him when you've probably the best number 10 in the world. Because I don't really treat Kevin De Bruyne as a number 10 because he pretty much plays all over now. And I think it goes without saying, but I think Bruno Fernandes is probably, you look at it in the Premier League, he's probably top 3 in the Premier League in terms of players overall. So you're not going to be taking him out or changing his position to accommodate Donny van de Beek. I think the biggest problem I actually think is when you go back to those Ajax teams is that Frankie de Jong would have been perfect for Manchester United and Donny van de Beek would have been perfect for Barcelona. And unfortunately, they went in the opposite directions. I look at Barcelona and I see Frankie de Jong play and I'm like, he doesn't fit what they're doing with the likes of Messi and with the kind of quick, fast-flowing football, because Frankie de Jong is one of those, he likes to play in a similar way that Paul Pogba does, that he has a really good range of passing.
I actually think he's very close to Carrick, Ciaran. If you know we're going to go and get a Carrick.
Yeah. He's the type of player that he does so much off the ball and on the ball. And I don't want this to kind of go more on him, but it's something I don't see from Donny. And I mentioned it, I think it was the Liverpool game, or it might have been a different one that he played in, but that there was a chance for him where he had about 15, 20 yards ahead of him and he had the ball. And instead of running forward with the ball into the space, he stops and is waiting for somebody. And that's just never going to be the way that Solskjaer wants to play. When you have players like Rashford, you have players like Bruno, Pogba for this year, you even look at Mason now and the way they want him to play. What Donny does, it doesn't fit. And at the start of the season, when you mentioned that he could end up getting so, I'm like, surely that couldn't happen. He's only.
Do you remember when I messaged you? So
yeah. I was thinking, surely that can't happen. He's just been brought in. Because at that point, we haven't seen him enough. But now you look at it and you see how the team plays. And I'm convinced of the fact is, if Villa were relegated, Grealish probably would have cost 40 to 60 million. And that's who would have been brought in. People say, well, why did we buy Donny van de Beek? The reason we bought it was a financial reason. It was a very cheap deal for a player that has qualities that can add something to a team. It's something that smart teams would have done. If that was offered to Man City, Barcelona, Madrid, they all would have done it if they could, because he's not a depreciating asset because he's still very young and can build in. What we're saying here doesn't mean that he can't play for Manchester United. He can, but he's a depth piece, and that's really all he's going to be because he doesn't fit the way United play. And no matter how much we want him, we can't just force him into playing number 6. Personally, I think the only way that it's going to work is that he's going to have to take this year as a transition year into the Premier League and adjust his game and learn different parts of the game, because I don't see enough there to where you look at the performances. And we mentioned this about Pogba. I don't see where his performances warrant him starting, or even honestly, and I know this might be harsh, even warrant him coming on. Because you look at some of the players that are on the bench and you're like, they can actually provide more. So like, for example, if we had, let's say we were playing a game and it was Matic, Pogba and Bruno, and we need some change in midfield because we're tiring, who would you rather bring on? Would you rather bring on McTominay or would you rather bring on Van de Beek?
I never thought I would say this, Ciaran, but I would be like, bring McTominay. In the beginning of the season, I would say Van de Beek. Right now.
Yeah. The reason is because McTominay is actually getting in positions that affect the attacking line. While Van de Beek, you do see him up there, I feel like he's a bit too passive with his ideas. He tries to play that simple ball, and then when he tries to play it forward, it's always that little bit off. And it's a really tough one. One of the comments that mentioned Gundogan, I think they're so far away from each other. When Gundogan was at Dortmund, he was probably one of the best at number 8 in the world. And if he didn't tear his ACL, probably would have been playing the way he is this season at City for the last 3 seasons. And I can guarantee you, if that was the case, City would have won the last 3 Premier League titles. And
he's that good.
He's that good. Yeah, and it was just taking time. Obviously, look, ACLs repair differently. Some people can come back from them and are great straight away. And it's like a new leg, basically. But then there's others that it actually takes a little bit of time for you to feel normal because there's a big mental side to it. And it looks like this season we're seeing kind of Gundogan back from those Dortmund days. And that's a scary proposition considering you look at Kevin De Bruyne when he comes back from injury. If they bring in a proper striker, it's very difficult. Like, I don't know about you guys, but looking at kind of City going forward, I think we all know in the summer Messi's most likely going to Manchester City. So it's a really tricky one. Some of the comments, and I've had a lot of...
I want to pose this to you, and then after Joe, I'll come with a comment about question from James. I'm assuming it's James from One United podcast in the comments. Hello, James. Nice to see him, mate. He will ask about the confidence, but Andrew's got another one here, and look what happens with Donny van de Beek when he plays with De Jong. It's possible for him to fit into a world-class midfield with the right guys. That would include Bruno. He's not ready to play now. Agreed fully. Look, I agree with that in part. I'll tell you why I agree with that in part, and I'll let you answer this, Ciaran. I agree with that in part because we've seen Donny van de Beek play in the midfield with quality players around. And look, there's not many better than Frankie de Jong out there. He's absolutely fantastic. Such a big fan of him. Intelligent, great passer of the ball, reads the game fantastically well. He's just not suited to Barcelona. I agree with you on that, Ciaran. You've been banging on about this for a year. Genuinely, when de Jong made that move. But I'll tell you why, and this is my opinion, why Van de Beek, even if you got Frankie de Jong and put him in this Man United midfield, you have to remember that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 is different to Pep Guardiola's 4-3-3, which is different to Jurgen Klopp's 4-3-3. I don't see a scenario where Donny van de Beek fits and reaches his potential in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's system, the way that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer expects his midfielders to play. Even when United get, if they, fingers crossed, they get the signings they want, United will not be as expansive as City, they'll not be as silky as City, they'll not be as intense, in terms of their pressing and in terms of their ball movement as City. They just won't. Why? Because Pep Guardiola and his philosophy is on a different level to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and in a different way as well. I'm not saying one's better than the other. We know Pep is. But this is a point. You could still get these players around, Ciaran, can't you? But that doesn't mean that suddenly his performance is going to go through the next level. Like, I just don't think that the way Ollie likes to play and the way that that Van de Beek plays, I just don't think it actually works together. I mean, I've seen people say, Ciaran, Van de Beek on the right wing, in the Mata role, doesn't work. And there was a comment from Aaron. So Aaron, you were asking a little bit earlier. I'll bring it back to you, Ciaran, before I come to Joe. You were asking, Aaron was asking, oh, well, we can play Bruno, Mata, and Van Beek together. We did against Istanbul away. Again, you can't play those three together. Too many players that don't run beyond the last man, apart from Van Beek. But Bruno doesn't do it as much. He likes to carry, and so does Mata.
Yeah, it's really tough. I don't think it's as easy as saying you put him in with world-class players and suddenly he's that much better. He would have been in a midfield with two world-class players in Bruno Fernandes and Paul Pogba. It's not about a player being able to raise his level. All this comes back to styles. You bring in players to a team and they work in some systems and don't work in others. That's why I've harped on about this for so long, that it's so important that you have that consistency in recruitment, because you need the style to fit the way you want to play. And that's why when we were talking about it before, why Jadon Sancho made sense, because it fit the style Manchester United wanted to play. It's the reason why I've said for so long in the past year that why, even though it was a lot of money, why Harry Maguire actually didn't make that much sense, because it really wasn't the way United were initially building up the team. They were trying to become this more athletic, free-flowing football type team. You brought in Lindelof, even, who's is a pretty good athlete. You bring in Wan-Bissaka, who's a great defender and athlete, and then you do the opposite for Maguire, which was compared to the other defenders that we were linked with in that summer. Then you see Bruno comes in. We've seen kind of what that's done. We got linked with Jack Grealish, and you're like, that makes sense. That's the way that we want to play. And for me, I just think Donny doesn't fit that style. It works with Frankie de Jong because they played with each other for so long. They played with each other for 10 plus years.
Since
So
they were kids.
if it doesn't work with a player that you've played with for that long, it's not going to work with anybody. So obviously that one made sense. So like if he got sold to Barcelona tomorrow, he'd probably be really good for Barcelona because one, he has his friend in midfield, plays a similar way as some of the wingers and the attackers play for Barcelona. But the problem is, even if United brought in, pick whoever you want, pick Haaland, pick Sancho, pick Rice, pick whoever, that doesn't mean that Van de Beek is going to work, because I understand why he worked with Mata, because they're kind of slower, more intricate passing players. And those type of players do work together. But I'm sorry, that's just not the way United play. You look at the strikers, it's not even the way they're asking the strikers to play. We've been saying over the past 3 or 4 games how much better Mason Greenwood has been. What's the reason? He's more direct, he's getting in behind, he's attacking defenders. With players like Van de Beek, that's not the case. Where he actually would probably fit is if you did have a striker like Haaland, where you can play it into him and he plays it kind of the 1-2s and is very clever with his passing. That makes sense. I don't think that works with the current strikers that we have.
But it's also not how United play.
Yeah, it's not the way United want to play. United want to play fast attacking football. The problem is Van de Beek's not a fast attacking player. So personally, I don't think he can play number 6 for Manchester United. I think the only way he's probably going to make it into the team over the next couple of seasons is if he can transition into kind of a hybrid of an 8 and a 6 to where he can get into that team. But I completely agree with what you said early on the season, and I didn't see it early on because I didn't see him enough for Man United. I don't think he fits, and unfortunately, because he seems like a good guy, he's a good player. We're not saying that he's not good, but I think stylistically, he probably just doesn't suit Manchester United. I don't even know if he suits the Premier League, to be honest.
Yeah, it's something you said in the group chat. I'm going to read out some comments, and Joe, I'm going to come to you. Urwa's saying here that you disagree. That's fine. You disagree. Van Beek needs a run of games. No, sorry, I'm reading the wrong comment. I'm going to read that in a sec. Put it on the thing. But, you were saying about the Newcastle game, we're losing 1-0, 1-2 to Mata, Bruno, etc. And obviously he scored goals. It was a good performance. You can do it in bursts, but you're not going to be relying on the whole game with Van de Beek, Bruno, and Mata, in my opinion. You can disagree with that. It's fine. That's why we're all here. Want to hear all your comments. You also said, Urwa, that although it feels like Van de Beek needs a run of games for him to be at his best, you don't just play him at 10 and play Matic and Fred behind, expect him to play like Bruno. That's a very, very fair point. Joe, I'm going to come to you. And James from the One United podcast was asking, do you think it's a confidence thing? That kind of ties in with what Urwa was saying. Look, confidence is a massive thing. He's definitely lost a little bit of confidence. There's no doubt about it. But what I will say as well is that when he's had opportunities to play, he has not shown anywhere near enough aggression, intensity. He has not taken his opportunities. He's had minutes. He's started games. He hasn't done anything about it. So you can't be blaming the 2 lads behind him. Bruno plays with Fred and McTominay. I looked at earlier. I believe Bruno was on for half an hour, maybe a bit longer. I believe he had more forward passes. I checked earlier today. I don't know the exact number. And Van de Beek, who played, nearly 75 minutes? You need to take these opportunities, and he hasn't done that. It doesn't mean he's a bad player at all. But confidence is a big part, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, massively. He's not a bad player, Haider. He's Dutch. There's no such thing as a bad Dutch player, I don't think. Definitely not. Well, I think he's Dutch. I might need to check his passport. Same as I need to check Fred's passport as well, because I'm not convinced he's Brazilian, mate. So we'll have to see. But, I think that, look, Ciaran's broke it down brilliantly, and I think he's absolutely spot on what he's saying. So I don't want to obviously go over a lot of what Ciaran said, but I think, from a confidence point of view, it is huge. I mean, hopefully we'll never see it, but obviously if you think about Bruno since he's come in, everything he's touched has turned to gold. So, he's had a completely sort of contrasting sort of time at Manchester United. And look, I would have understood it if we'd have been here 12 months on with Bruno saying similar things or worrying a little bit about his form. I mean, he come from the Portuguese league, which is a completely different league. And I think that's what makes Bruno's transition even more impressive, because he's coming from a league with a sort of similar standards, especially in Europe, and it's just phenomenal what he's done. And I think it's credit to Bruno, and it shines Bruno in an even brighter light when you think about the players that he's playing around, to be fair, because like you said, for the majority of the time he's played in front of McTominay and Fred, who are not the best people at sort of feeding him the ball, as we've analysed before. So I think, I think that's what makes Bruno's time at SoFi, his first year, even more incredible. The fact that the players play around.
Do you see elements of Veron with Van der Beek?
I see elements in the sense of the impact that people expected him to have, and he hasn't had. I don't know whether I see aspects in terms of the type of player. To be honest with you, I'm struggling, because in those early 2000s when Veron came to United, I didn't really watch a lot of football around Europe. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but there wasn't exactly a lot on. I think when David Beckham moved to Real Madrid in 2003, that's where we first started seeing Spanish football, like on Sky and things. I know Italian football used to be on Channel 4, but that was going back to the 90s. Exactly, yeah, early 90s, mid-90s. Now, so it's very difficult for me to have understood what Man United thought they were going to get from Veron. And then, obviously, if you think about when he come to United, I was even more confused about what type of player Veron was, because he never showed what he was at United. So it's tough to say, but he's definitely that sort of, I mean, obviously, the fee that we paid for Veron back in the day was a lot more extortionate to the fee that we paid for Donny in terms of context. So I think we paid 20-odd million for Veron, was it, back into? I mean, that was a lot of money in 2000. That would be like paying 60 million, 70 million for a player now, if you know what I mean. So it wasn't a sort of deal that we did on the cheap, but it was a player that we expected to come in and have a massive impact on this team. I think United almost wanted Veron to be like help Keane out a little bit, you know what I mean? And say, take that responsibility off Keane. They knew that his career was winding down, and it was another one of them moves that Fergie was trying to do, a sort of a transition move, if you know what I mean. But it never came off. And then he went to Chelsea, and he did all right at Chelsea, didn't he, Veron? Under Mourinho, I think Mourinho's.
No,
it was before. It was before
Ranieri's Chelsea.
He did say yesterday, literally yesterday. This is why I bring him up, because he came into my mind. But he said yesterday, "I regret leaving United. I should have stayed longer." But again, it's that system thing. It's a system and style. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of comments here.
His first game that he played was ridiculously good.
But he was so talented, though.
I remember a story I was reading that Nicky Butt put out. It was when he was talking about some of the guys in the academy, and he was saying that he was suspended for Veron's first game, and Veron played so well that he thought he was never going to get back into the United team. Like, that's how good it was, and it just tailed off from there, unfortunately. But it's exactly what Joe's saying. It's
I mean, look, we've got
games that work, some it didn't.
Yeah, we've got a few comments always saying, he's 20. Van Beek's 23, has a long future. Veron was in his prime. All those things are true. I mean, I don't know if you dropped in a little bit late. We went completely into depth on why. He's just saying Van der Beek can play he's more of an 8 for you. We've gone into why. So I don't know if you did drop in late. Definitely check it out and drop back, because we went into it in a lot of depth on why. Perhaps in the Premier League, we don't see it. But what I will say before we move on, because we'll talk about Henderson and De Gea, who should be number one. But what I will say is, I've seen a lot of comparisons with Fred. Fred's taken time, but Fred was never a systemic problem with Fred. It wasn't like there was no way he could play in the system. It wasn't like he was a square peg in a round hole. It wasn't like he couldn't fit in. The problem with Fred was that he just looked terrible. He just hadn't adapted to the league. I don't think Van der Beek's looked terrible in terms of that sense. What I mean is, I don't think he's coming and you think, how the hell is this guy a footballer? How have we paid 40 million for him? I think what we see with Van der Beek, you're thinking, where does he play in this team? That's what I see when I see Van der Beek. I don't look at a player and think, I look at Van der Beek and I see a player, Joe, I'll let you jump in a sec. Right. I see him as a player who's got very, very good IQ. And I know it looks like I'm hating on him. It's not. It's just what I can see. I'm just saying what I can see, and I'm saying that United look a better side against McFred. And I'm saying this, and I'm not a fan of McFred. Rather than going and put Donny with one of them, it just doesn't. It's not going to work. He's obviously a clever player. He's makes great runs. Yes, players aren't picking out his runs, but I just don't see, unless Ollie completely changes the system, or Van der Beek drastically changes, which I can't see either. I can't see him changing his game completely. And what Ollie wants from the players that are playing deeper is he wants them to be physical as well. Paul Pogba is a physical specimen, Joe. So unless all these factors change, I'll happily turn around and say I was wrong. I don't care about that. There's no ego involved.
Mate,
but I just seen this story so many times with talented players that have come to the Premier League. I mean, I think Kai Havertz might be another player like that.
And that would be a bigger one, Haider, because I mean, how much was that deal? About 90 million, was it? And we talk about a generational talent there. I mean, that would be on another level. But I just wanted to follow up what you were saying about the comparison with Fred and Van der Beek and seeing it sort of thing. I always remember thinking when I first saw Fred in his first season in that first year, I was probably one of the fans that actually quite liked Fred even when he was struggling. And I think the reason that I felt like that was because I felt he was giving us something in game. I could see something. There was something likable about him. I could see an energy about him. I could see a willingness to try and learn. You could see there was a lot of naivety in his play, and it was just something that needed to be coached out of him. And you think about the type of player that we want Fred to be, you'd have thought Mourinho would have been an ideal coach for that, really, wouldn't you? You know what I mean? To bring that into his game, but it never really happened. And if anything, his development's improved most since under Solskjaer. So, I mean, obviously that's great, and it's kudos to Fred and kudos to Ollie, but that was the difference for you. When I see Van der Beek play at the moment, there's nothing that's saying to me, I can see where he's going here. I can see he's trying to be something. I can see that there's a development there. That's what I mean. As poor as Fred was, at least I was getting something in the games. I had something to hold on to, you know what I mean? A belief that
this comment from Alan is spot on. Van Beek's a better technical player than Fred, but Fred is easier fit in the squad. I mean, Andrew saying here, Tielemans stunk up his first season in the Premier League. A lot of players do. No, I'm just saying a lot of players do have poor seasons. Yeah. I'm not saying everyone just slots in. This isn't about Van der Beek. This is what I'm trying to get across. It's styles. It's purely Van der Beek.
Yeah.
We're not saying he's a bad player. He won't. It's purely the style that Man United play. And I'm not sure how many more times I can say. I'm not going to say it anymore after this. Just because
I'm seeing the same flaws. I'm seeing the same flaws in his game, Haider, that I saw in the very first game. That's the worry.
Yeah.
We said it after the very first couple of appearances. We said we need to see that he's willing to adapt, or that the system's willing to. The system's not going to adapt around him because there's too many great players in that system.
He's also there's no cause to do that. If he's banging Bruno numbers, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen.
So the responsibility is on him. And as much as I've always thought, one thing I will say about Donny is he's always come across as a good pro, a good lad, like Ciaran said. But good pros, good lads find a way of changing the game, whether they want to or they come to something else to work for their team, to work for their club. And I'm just not seeing that in Donny. He doesn't seem. Well, he's still doing the same things he was doing in his first couple of games. He doesn't seem to have that will. It's like, I'm Donny Van der Beek. This is the way I play. And every time he plays, it's almost as if, like, I'm going to keep doing this up to force your hand. With United aren't going to change, mate. You're not bigger than the club. So Donny's the one that's got to change, and I just don't see that happening.
The thing is, there's a few comments here. I'm going to move on after this, Ciaran. I'm going to come to you about Henderson. Look, Andrew, I see your points. But you're saying here that we want to adapt our style to be the team that we want to be. This United team under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is not going to be the team that you want it to be. We mentioned this a few podcasts ago. I don't know if you've seen it. And I think Rob said it many times in the masterclass. I think as fans, and I know this is not the case, which is why at times I haven't wanted Ole to be the long-term option because, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer are never going to play football like we see City or Liverpool. We're never going to play that style of football. Even when he gets his players, he is pragmatic first. Paulie, he's one of the biggest supporters of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, bangs on about this. And he says he's pragmatism first. He's like, right, we've got to keep the house in order before I go and do what I'm going to do. He thinks about how am I going to stop the opposition before he's not the sort of manager that's going to turn around, even with the players, and say, right, this is how we're going to play at City. He's not going to go and try to play City off the park because it's just, I think, the coaching, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. I'm just saying that he's not on that level. Not many are on the level of Klopp and Pep. And I think, saying here, around the game should with Bruno and change and fit in the system. I just don't see Donny doing that. We've seen that he's training. So look, players have, for example, come to clubs and they haven't played for months. When you see that sometimes, or some players just don't play for months. McTominay was an example, right? Didn't play for months. Played against City, came off after half an hour or 40 minutes. It was terrible. Then he just got benched for ages. and Jose worked on him in the training ground. And he came back and he smashed it the second half of the season. We know what happened with him. But what I'm trying to say is that you kind of think that's happening with Donny, that Ollie's saying, right, I'm going to work on you on the training ground. And so he's playing now, and you're not, like Joe saying, you're not seeing that much of a difference. So that's when the alarm bells are ringing. So, perhaps yesterday me saying his long-term future was reactionary. You know what? I was watching the game and I wasn't happy with his performance. But I still maintain, doesn't mean that he's not going to be a success anywhere. I just don't see, unless, maybe Ollie will change the system drastically and I'll be wrong, and that's fine. But he's not going to do that because history suggests he won't do that. So it's for Ollie, for Donny, it's almost sink or swim, right? You got to adapt or you go. And he will not have any shortage of takers. He's a really talented player. And if he goes and kills it at another big club, we shouldn't turn around, Ollie's failed him. No, he just didn't fit. Some players are great elsewhere. Like Eden Hazard's a great example. Fantastic at Chelsea. He was never going to work around Madrid. Anyone could have told you that. Doesn't mean he's suddenly a bad player. To Chelsea fans, he's an absolute legend. To Premier League fans, he's a great player. But he just didn't fit at Chelsea. So we could talk about Donny all day, and I really do hope that when he gets his opportunity, but I do think that as each game goes on, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has shown that if you don't perform, you're out in the cold. And I think you will not see Donny play regular minutes now, probably maybe Europa League, maybe a few more cup games, but I don't see him coming on in the Premier League. And we've seen that. It's a real shame because he's a great pro. He is a talented player, but it's a system problem. And that's why when people compare it to Fred, for me, it doesn't really wash. But Ciaran, we'll come to you and let's talk about Henderson. And we've spoken with Donny for nearly about 40 minutes. Great conversation, great comments, guys, as well. I completely understand everyone's points. We all do, but it's just that there's more to just being a talented player or putting talented players around you. That's why we're all here. Everyone giving their opinions. It's great. Ciaran, Henderson or David De Gea? I know we disagreed on this. Beginning of the season, we had the conversation, and I'm going to say it, I seem to be the villain. I mean, I'm getting a lot of I will be getting a lot of stick after this comes out, but Henderson, never really been that high on him. I think he's a good shot stopper. I think he's all right at commanding his area. He hasn't really shown to me right now that he's anywhere near, sort of the upper echelons of goalkeepers when it comes to commanding his area. Not good with his feet. We know that. And he hasn't had to do that at Sheffield United. Is it right now that he comes in? I actually think it probably is the right decision, but I'm not convinced by him. I still think he needs a couple of years on loan. I think he's got the talent, but this is United. You might have at Sheffield United, he was under constant shots at goals. But Man United, you might have nothing to do, and then you've got to be focused. And I think it's too early, but he's here. He signed the contract. Should he be number one now?
It's a tough one. I think projecting for the entire season is hard. I don't think you just make the change from De Gea to Henderson and say this is who our starting goalkeeper is. I think definitely for the next 2 to 3 weeks, because I was looking at the fixtures, you can definitely make that change, because I think the Premier League games are West Brom and Newcastle, and you have the 2 Sociedad games in between. So I think, and we've just seen him play against West Ham, so it's a perfect excuse to get Henderson to play, because you look at the Newcastle game and look, Newcastle try and play football and they're not good defensively, so United should be able to beat them. West Brom, it'll be one of those that you just has to be careful. In terms of, like you said, it can be one of those games where you don't have to do anything, and then suddenly you have to make important saves. But I don't think he's been as bad as some people actually try and make it out, because I think there are some people that really are kind of gung-ho on David De Gea has to play in every single game, and I disagree, because I think we've seen some of the regression from David De Gea in the past 3 seasons. And I think at the start of the season, we were winning games after that first slump, and people forgot about this. But there were still signs there that something isn't clicking for De Gea. I don't know if he's a bit too passive. Because I can't remember a game where I've seen him put his body on the line to save and to help United win. And that's a big issue. because with games like we saw against Everton, where United are weak is in defence on set pieces and in those kind of last few minutes of games. And as the goalkeeper, you need to do absolutely everything you possibly can to save it. And if that means putting your body on the line, you do that. You see Ederson do it all the time. You see Alisson do it for Liverpool. When you're in, like, we haven't said it's a title challenge, but when you're in the top half and the top four, your goalkeeper needs, especially for United, who control most of the games that they play, your goalkeeper has to be able to do whatever he can. And look, De Gea is never going to get better at commanding his area. It's just not going to happen. The problem is when we're weak defensively at corners, it highlights that weakness even more, and it's not getting better. I've seen Henderson, while he's not the best at commanding it, I think he's a lot better than David De Gea doing it. I think his weakest part of his game, and what you've mentioned, is playing the ball at his feet. Absolutely it is. And
that's a big
it is an issue, but what you do is you then have to, as the managers, you have to balance on what you want to do. Like, at the end of the day, I think I would prefer my goalkeeper, where maybe he's not as good with the ball at his feet and has to get rid of it quicker, than a goalkeeper that is going to make mistakes that cost us to concede goals. And for me, that's it. I look at the future as well. I'm like, look, no matter what we want to say, David De Gea is not the future goalkeeper for Manchester United. And the sooner Man United figure out if Dean Henderson is, the better. If they play him consistently over the next year or two and find out, okay, he's our goalkeeper, that's great. If they play him consistently and find out he's not our goalkeeper, well then you need to find that goalkeeper. Personally, I think he's a good shot stopper. He's good at coming and collecting the ball. He actually sets up his defense very well, and it's the reason you don't see. I think his poorest game was against Sheffield United. Other than that, I think he's been fairly calm and collected when he's played. And I think
okay though. Like, people talk about, like, last night, people were like, look at the way Henderson did this. I'm like,
I think people overrate it because they want to demean David De Gea. But I think the fact that you don't see a huge drop off when he's playing, when he doesn't play consistently, shows you that he's doing a pretty good job. Because look, we've seen it at other clubs. We've seen it at Chelsea for years now, that when they bring in kind of their second choice, or they brought in Kepa, how big of a drop off there was from previous seasons. I don't think there's that with Dean Henderson. I personally think he needs to play, because if he plays, I think you'll see him more and you get to see some of his abilities. It's not surprising he was one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League last season. It's not surprising that there was teams that called United to try and sign him on a permanent deal this season. But the problem United put themselves in is they have two goalkeepers, and both keepers want to start games. Both goalkeepers are good enough to start in the Premier League. But now Solskjaer has to figure out the time when that transition actually takes place, because whether you like Dean Henderson or not, they signed him to a 6-year contract. So in the eyes of Solskjaer and in the eyes of the board, and in the eyes of the board, he's the goalkeeper for the future. So you have to figure out when's the right time. I think right now is a good chance to kind of give him that kind of chance to play in the next 4 games, because I just feel like De Gea has been making more and more mistakes. Can he play for the rest of the season? It won't cost United too much. Yeah, absolutely. But I think there is going to have to be a point in time where that transition actually has to take place. And like I said, you were completely right that if Henderson isn't going to play a lot, let's say this season and next season, he's not going to play a lot. Send him out on loan for one more season next season. Say, when you come back, you're the starting goalkeeper, because De Gea will be gone. I think that's because he needs to play. So either plays for Man United or you loan him out to a Premier League club.
But this is the thing, you look at the way Chelsea handled the whole Courtois check exemplary, the way they did it. I know, Joe, by the way, you're on mute, just to let you know before I come to you. They handled it very well, but also Courtois went to Atletico for 2-3 years. I do think people commend Henderson, saying, "Oh, it's great, he's come back." And I do in a way. But I also think United should have been strong and be like, no, Dean, you're going to have your 6-year contract. You'll have your 120k a week, but you're going back on loan to play. There's no good him sitting on. This is my opinion. I understand when people say he's around the squad, he's learning. You don't ever learn as much sitting on the bench or not practicing than doing the real thing. The real thing's being a goalkeeper. And then they should have sent him to a team which want to play at the back. Because, as Andrew said here, I mean, we're agreeing on something. When we talk about styles, though, doesn't De Gea fit that style more? I'd say yes. De Gea
that's
fits
only one part of the style, though. We're saying
it's a massive part here, because we build out from the back. If the
it
keeper
is,
can't
but then I'd also say one of the styles of being a Manchester United goalkeeper is to actually be able to command your area when we're in our weakest point and actually be able to make those saves and not make mistakes. Think about it. If De Gea doesn't make 2 mistakes against that Everton in the Everton game, it's a pretty straightforward win. I personally prefer my goalkeepers to be the reason that you've won the game by making really important saves. De Gea did that early in his career.
What if Henderson, like, he's playing out the back? We've seen him do it once already this season. He hasn't played that many games. What if that keeps on happening? Playing out with your feet as a goalkeeper is harder than what's instinctive is command your box. De Gea's not great at it. We know that. But if Dean messes up 1 or 2 more times, his confidence is going to go like that. Like, playing out the back is a huge. I've been looking at this a little bit more because obviously this season De Gea has got better at it. There's no doubt about it. But when people say commanding area is more important, I'm going to disagree with this. Yes, 10 years ago it was more important. 15, 20 years ago it was more important to command your area. But now for a goalkeeper, people are buying keepers. People bought Alisson, they bought Edison because they were good at passing out the back. Ollie's committed to passing out the back, and we complain about Maguire being slow on, in distribution, Lindelof not being good enough. It also starts right from the back. That's what I worry about. I think he should be dropped. De Gea should be dropped. And I'll come to Joe in a sec. I'll let Ciaran have his say before I come to you, Joe. I think De Gea should be dropped because you can't do what he did the other night and not get dropped, and it's not the first time. But I also am not one of those that thinks suddenly you put Henderson in. I'm not saying this is you, but people do. Suddenly the defense is going to be better. He doesn't make Maguire quicker. He doesn't make Lindelof stronger. He's also worse at passing out from the back. And then as soon as Henderson messes up, all the fans will be in his back here. I'm simply saying what you got to look at his strengths and weaknesses. He'll be better at commanding his box. United probably might concede less from corners, but they could also concede from open play because Henderson's trying to play at the back and he's not calm enough to do it.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair comment, but I also think you look at some of those City and Liverpool teams, and one of their strengths doesn't really need the keeper to have to command his box. The problem is one of United's biggest weaknesses means that they actually do need their goalkeeper to do that. And we're seeing having a weak defense and having a weak keeper in terms of coming out and pretty much relaxing the defense it's causing a lot of issues, and it's really the difference we've seen from De Gea. We always know he's been a good shot stopper, and he's never commanded his box, but we're seeing those weaknesses get kind of emphasized even more because of the way we're playing. And that, look, it's a problem. I think I said the same. Look, De Gea has to be dropped just to show that when you make mistakes at a big club, you can't just be given your place. You have to earn it. And that's why I think out of the keepers that are there, Henderson's the one that has to be given the chance because you signed him to that contract. And you've given him they basically told him that he'll be starting for Manchester United. So you have to give that to him. Does it mean it's going to fix the defense? Absolutely not. The only thing that fixes the defense is signing a new centre back, and maybe it works out that way.
More.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you have a strong defense, then you can really tell how good the keeper is. We know De Gea is better at shot stopping because he's very good. My problem has become, I think he's been way too passive as a goalkeeper and hasn't really come out when it's a one-on-one. He stays in his line way too often and I don't think he anticipates what's going to happen. He used to do it, and for some reason now he doesn't do it anymore. So for me, it's not so much that Henderson's going to come in and fix it. I think he's a good goalkeeper. But at some point in time, you have to prepare for the future because you can't afford to have David De Gea and Dean Henderson at the club for the next 3 seasons. it doesn't make financial sense.
Well, one has to go. Yeah, I mean, between them, what are their wages? Nearly 500,000.
500K. Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. You have Dean Henderson that's signed for the next 6 years. David De Gea is signed for the next 2 or 3. So realistically, at some point you make that transition. You see, can Dean Henderson do it? If there's not a big drop off, you make that change, because at the end of the day, United are a team that aren't going to concede loads of chances in games, just the way that they play, and they dominate most Premier League games. So if there's not a huge drop-off, personally, I say you make the change and you deal with it. And if it doesn't work, you bring somebody else in. And that's the way you have to do it, because you can't just stay in the same position that they're in now, because you need to try and get some improvements. There's going to be a trade-off between the two goalkeepers. Henderson's better at one thing but worse at the others. If there's mistakes that are made from playing out from the back, well, then you need to make a little bit of an adjustment there. Other teams do it all the time. Not every goalkeeper in world football that's at the top level is great at playing out from the back. And different managers have to be able to kind of work around that. I think in the Premier League, we've gotten a little bit spoiled by looking at Ederson and looking at Alisson, but there's not that many goalkeepers available anyway that can do that. And personally, I think, like I said, you do have to look at the next couple of years and what you're going to do, because you're not going to keep two goalkeepers at that level happy.
No, some great points. I mean, I do agree. Joe, I'm going to come to you. I'll let you have the final say on it. No, Ciaran, you make a good point about, not every keeper plays out the back. You look at Oblak, for me, is the best keeper in the world.
100%.
Bar none. And he's not playing out the back all the time. But when you do look at it, Joe, we've seen this, Ollie. We were complaining, weren't we? Saying, "Oh, Ollie, why are you playing out the back? You haven't got the players to play out the back." He's not going to change it. Like we talk about Van der Beek, he's not going to change the system for him. It's a similar thing. Stylistically, he's not going to change it. He's not going to say, right, okay, so now that we've got Dean, we're going to play long more, because again, we don't have players to do that, do we? We don't have someone to hold out. Maybe Cavani, but apart from that, he's not going to play every single game. But look, on the Henderson and De Gea, where are you sitting on it? And do you think that De Gea has been hard done by? Because some of the stuff you're seeing is so over the top. Like, okay, yeah, he cost us the game the other day. But myself personally, I actually think he's been better. It's not difficult. Last season he was bad, but I don't think he's been that bad. I'm a big David De Gea fan. I think Ciaran's right, the transition's coming. It has to be done soon, probably in the next season. But has he been that bad? I mean, look, Aaron's got a comment here. De Gea set his own ridiculously high standards. For the highest paid keeper in the world, you need to play like it. Oblak is incredible. Very, very fair. I think United made a mistake back then when they gave him the 500k contract, or whatever it is, 350 with bonuses. And I said at the time, and I've always loved De Gea, but I said at the time, this is bad business for United, because that season in 2017 was an anomaly. I mean, again, United Arena, I keep on mentioning him, but he's just got a fantastic account, and he actually showed this, the sort of save percentage, and he's almost doubled in that season. It's an anomaly. The rest of the seasons he's kept pretty much the same. He's dropped this season. Last season he's better from last season. But yeah, where are you sitting on it? Is he getting treated harshly? And is it time, in your opinion, that we start to look towards the future with Henderson? You're on mute.
Classic football. It's better to go on mute on Red Devils Talk than the masterclass, though, isn't it? Let's be honest. No, look. To be honest,
look, I've had a long day at work, long week.
I'll let you off.
And I was angry because we drew 3-3. So yeah.
No worries, mate. Probably for the best you were on mute then, to be honest. No, I just think it's classic football fandom, isn't it, Haider? We have short memories. Football fans have short memories. De Gea, between the years of probably 2014, 2017, kept this club relevant, because without De Gea, we'd have probably had Arsenal-type seasons, if you know what I mean. Some of those seasons where, we just managed to scrape into the top 4, or we just managed to scrape in the Europa League even. A lot of that was thanks to David De Gea, so I don't think you can forget that. And I think I'll give Paulie some credit here, because I was doing a show with him yesterday, and he said, when you get to De Gea's age, you get contracts based on what you've done rather than what you're going to achieve in that whatever that period of that contract is. And I think, obviously, De Gea got that big contract as a reward for the sort of 3-4 years, like I just said, that he helped keep United relevant. Now, looking at De Gea versus Henderson here now in the situation we have, we went into this season thinking, wow, we've got two fantastic goalkeepers here. We know that Dave's been at the top of his game for a lot of years, with the exception last season. And we know how good, obviously, Dean Henderson had been at Sheffield United for the last 2 or 3 years, albeit a different sort of situation. But actually, the more I look at it, I think it's become a problem for United, because I think they've got 2 goalkeepers here with similar flaws in their games. So it's not like, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, you and Ciaran said a lot there, so I don't know if I've missed bits and bobs, but I feel like it's not like you look at one of them and think he does that really well and the other one doesn't. And I feel like this commanding of the area, it's a weakness for De Gea. We know it is. It always has been. But I've also seen situations where I've wanted more from Henderson in that area as well, even in the short period of time he's been at. I think the Man City goal in the Carabao Cup, the second goal, was it the free kick? I think I'd have liked him, in hindsight, to have come for that. There's been a couple of examples. The passing out from the back, I don't think Dave is great with his feet, but we've also seen situations where Henderson's not great with his feet as well, namely against Sheffield United earlier in the season at Bramall Lane, obviously early doors. So it's interesting, and this was my big fear. I think I said it on the show right at the start of this season, was you get a situation now, if Henderson is going to come in for these next 4 or 5 games, the pressure is on. The pressure is really on. Because what you don't want to be doing with your goalkeeping position is you don't want to be flip-flopping between. I think we're seeing Everton are in the midst of it at the moment, aren't they? They've obviously had... they've tried to stay true to Jordan Pickford, and it didn't work.
They're both as bad as each other, Joe. They brought in the Serie A version of Jordan Pickford.
Yeah, exactly. They brought Alisson in, and, I mean, obviously... Not just, I mean, he was poor. He was, for as bad as De Gea was against us the other day, he was just as poor. And he's having trouble now. So Ancelotti's in a situation, what do I do? Because do I go back to Pickford? That's what you don't, you can only play one person at a time. And I don't think Ollie wants to get himself in that situation where if he plays Dean now for the next 3 or 4 games and it doesn't quite work out for Dean, what does he do? It's like, does he go back to De Gea? But it's a bit harder on that level, because once you drop Dave, do you lose Dave? We don't know, do we? We've never been in this situation. Does he lose Dave? If he makes Henderson the number 1, we don't know how De Gea is going to take to that. He's never been in that situation really at United. So I think it's a real tricky situation to do with. It's one that I could foresee actually happening at the start of the season, because I thought Dave was going to struggle again, because all the indications last season is that he struggled, and I thought if he carries that on this year,
I think a lot of people actually aren't appreciating the fact that he has improved. That's what's frustrating me, is that I think people are saying that he's been last season was so bad. He conceded 8-9 goals. Yes, he was bad against Everton, but I'm struggling to think of more than maybe 2 or 3 times. I mean, maybe that's the problem, isn't it? He's Man United keeper. This shouldn't be happening. All keepers have a few blips, don't they, Joe? But I'm struggling to genuinely see, apart from the Everton game, no one was calling for De Gea to be dropped. No one was calling. Well, a few people were, but most people weren't. I feel like it's a knee jerk from what we saw at Everton, against Everton, and now people are, he's finished now. I honestly, there were so many more players that were poor. Maguire was poor.
Yeah,
it's not just De Gea. Should we drop Maguire because Maguire was at fault for 2 goals? Is that what we should do?
Yeah, look, we also said at the start of the season, though, Haider, that he was only one big mistake. Sorry, I think I've got a bit of a lag here, mate, so it might look like I'm talking over. Sorry about that, mate. But it's almost like, it feels like, I said at the start of the season, one big mistake was all it was going to take with a keeper of the Henderson's class behind him. I mean, last season, he was making mistakes, but he had Romero behind him. And as good as the number 2 as Romero's been for United, I never felt like Romero was ever going to take the gloves off of De Gea, whereas now he's got a serious goalkeeper here that will. And I did get the sort of inclination that, like Ciaran said, you give him a 6-year contract, that United do see De Gea as a long-term goalkeeper. So Ollie was almost looking for a reason, looking for an excuse to drop De Gea. So I always thought it might only take 1 mistake or 2 mistakes for Henderson to get it run. And we'll see, obviously, time will tell now. I think, obviously, if he plays against West Brom, I think the league games, it doesn't matter who you play in the league, it's usually an indicator of who's going to be a number 1 goalkeeper. So I think if Dean keeps the gloves for the West Brom game, I think that might be a sign. And then, obviously, it might not be. Because, I mean, let's be honest, he has played him in a few league games this season. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the change. But it's just one of those positions, Ada. I don't know. I've never been a goalkeeper, obviously. I've never been a football manager, but I just feel it's one of the positions you don't really want to be rotating, flip-flopping about, really. You want to have your goalkeeper and have it nailed on. And the other thing you got to say that is in Henderson's favour is that he's younger. So these things that we're saying De Gea can't do right now, we've got to be optimistic that Dean can do them. You know, we've got to be optimistic that Dean can learn them and obviously develop that side of the game.
That is a big thing. I'm going to read out
of course,
a few comments. Joe here. So Greg's got one. Hello, mate. Nice to see you here. Henderson didn't really have anything to do last night to even justify starting over Dave. It's crazy. Alan's saying here, problem is both De Gea and Henderson are on huge contracts, so who's going to buy them for a reasonable transfer fee? That's a very, very fair comment. That's my worry. How are we actually going to shift David De Gea? I mean,
that is the other problem.
Paris Saint-Germain, that's the only option.
Yeah, that is the only option. But look, if Paris Saint-Germain also want Pogba, which they do, you know, that the only way that works. And Neymar just signed a new deal, didn't he? Mbappe, I know you've
money is no problem for PSG. So if they want the two players, they can have the two players. They're not like when we talk about Madrid and Barcelona and the likes of them in financial difficulty. Two of the teams in Europe that are not in financial difficulty are PSG and Manchester City. So in terms of any transfer and the coronavirus and the pandemic, how it's affected the market, it's affected the market for about 99% of the teams. But for those two that have the amount of wealth that they do, they can buy whoever they want. The biggest issue is David De Gea. How you get rid of that contract, it's very tough. If you decided that Dean Henderson wasn't the goalkeeper, that's not too bad to get rid of. Goalkeepers for Premier League clubs aren't that far off. I know there's a couple that have been, especially now, because look, the way contracts work that people forget, it's not just that one person gets overpaid this amount. If Dean Henderson gets that, the next goalkeeper that gets signed in the Premier League for a top club is gonna get more than Dean Henderson. That's the way it works.
I do think the Kepa transfers massively shifted everything.
Oh yeah, completely. That completely overweighted everything. And then the problem will be is, look, we assume that Everton are going to have to replace their goalkeepers again. They're going to sign somebody that's going to have to be a big money signing. You'll probably have the same in Chelsea in a year or two, because I don't think Mendy's that good as a goalkeeper.
I mean, Chelsea fans are even saying, look, do we need to upgrade on him? He's always been steady Eddie. See what I did there?
He'll be fine but when Chelsea are actually ready to compete, because I don't think they are for 12 to 18 months. When they're properly competing for a title, they're going to need a better goalkeeper. They'll bring somebody in, and the amount of money we talk about for certain goalkeepers in the league now, it goes up every single time. It's the same. When a new transfer comes in, these agents, they're the same agents realistically, and they look at what one person's gotten, and then they're like, okay, so you're bringing us in. We want a 2% increase on what that is. And then that keeps going up. And that's why you see all these really high wages. So the next big sign that comes into the Premier League will get X amount. But then the signing after that gets more. And that's just the way it works.
Yeah, it's very fair. Guys, we're going to wrap up now. Thank you very much. This is a great debate, honestly. Great podcast. You know, if you're new here, thank you for joining us. And we'll be doing this pretty much either every Wednesday, sort of 7:30. We did 8 o'clock today because Ciaran was busy. Or we'll do Tuesday at 7:30 if United are playing on a Wednesday, because that's when the masterclass will be after the games. But this podcast, I mean, we've changed it up a little bit. Obviously, we used to have a few more people, but this is purely going to go really deep into some topics like we did today. We're not just going to do match reviews. We're not going to be reactionary. We're going to, if we have a strong opinion, we're going to say why we think that. And we want you guys to get involved, because that's what makes it so great. You know, there's some really great comments and really made us think as well. And, you know, and review things a little bit more clearly. So, Joe, thank you very much, mate. You look tired. Maybe it's time for bed for you. You're about 50.
I'm ready for you to sing me that lullaby, mate.
No, that doesn't happen. And Ciaran, always a pleasure, mate. Thank you very much for joining me. As you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, we are also on Twitch. I mean, judging by, you know, most normal person, like if you're 14, you're on Twitch. But, you know, if someone is here who does watch Twitch, then yeah, check us out on there. Obviously, you can see us on Twitter. You can see us on Instagram. There's so many now. YouTube, Periscope, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.